This is an instructional video on how to remove and replace the main actuator on a Compaction Technologies low profile compactor. You are going to want to work on the compactor in an area where you can supply power to the machine, as we will need to supply power to the machine multiple times throughout the process. The tools you'll need for this job are as follows. Either a screwdriver with a T25 tip or a cordless drill and T25 bit, a socket wrench, 6-inch extension, and 3/8 inch socket head. All of these I use with a 1/4 inch drive, a wire cutter or something else to cut zip ties, and a wire cutter and stripper in one tool, a fine flathead screwdriver or jeweler screwdriver to use moving wires in and out of waggle connectors, a screwdriver with a Phillips head or a Phillips head bit to use with the cordless drill, an 8mm deep socket head, and a socket attachment to use with the cordless drill, a box cutter, a Sharpie marker and some masking tape, or some other way to mark bundles of wires, a tape measure, a 3/4 inch deep socket head, and a socket wrench for it. I usually use a 3/8 drive on these two, a 3/4 inch wrench. Optional tools that'll help are a small rubber mallet and a flashlight. You would also like to have a jack if at all possible. It is extremely helpful. However, it is not absolutely required. You should also have a new motor sent to the store from Compaction that you can find at the store owner or manager. It should contain the new motor and some zip ties, possibly. The first step is to supply power to the machine and open the main door with the machine key. To do so, simply turn the key to the 3 and 9 position and open the main door. At this point, if the trash has not been emptied, please ask someone from the store to empty the trash. Once the trash has been emptied, pull out the trash bin tub. Once that is done, close the door and turn the key to the 6 and 12 position to lock it. The LCD should display green ready. Once you have closed and locked the door, you're going to want to initiate a compaction cycle to drive the head down. But you're going to want to stop the machine from having power halfway through the compaction cycle so the head is in the bottom of the machine. So, to start the compaction cycle, simply take the key and rotate it quickly to the 3 and 9 position and then back. Now do that again, but when the LCD displays about 6 to 5 seconds, you're going to want to unplug the machine from the power source. Next, we're going to want to open the main door. Because we do not want to resupply power to the machine, we're going to do this using the safety interlock switch. For instructions on how to do that, please see the appropriate video. Once you have the main door open using the safety interlock switch, next you're going to want to remove the machine top. For instructions on how to do that, please see the appropriate video. Once you have the top off the machine, you're going to want to go to the left side of the compactor. If you look down in the electronics tray, you should see the circuit board. You're looking for the 3 waggle connectors towards you, furthest left, with the skinny white and black wires. These are the 3 waggle connectors for the 3 read sense switches. Looking back at the 3 waggle connectors you're looking at, if you look on the circuit board past them, you'll see that each waggle connector input is labeled. We want to make sure that we label the wires for the read switches the same as what they're labeled on the circuit board, so when we plug them back in, we don't plug them in the wrong connector. To label them, I recommend using masking tape and a Sharpie marker. I simply label them F, H, and E for full, home, and extend as labeled on the circuit board, and wrapping them around the 2 wires that make up the bundle for each waggle connector. After you've done that, it is a good idea to come to the circuit board and take a picture of the 3 waggle connectors as well as the big power connector with the red and yellow wire for the main actuator. This is to know how the wires face when plugging them back in and putting them into the waggle connector. Next, it's a good idea to stand at the back of the machine, lay the tape measure out, and take a picture of the distance that each reed switch is along the main actuator, so when you're putting them back on the new actuator, you know where to set them. After you've taken a picture of the distances of the reed switch, come back to the circuit board and you're going to want to unplug the power Wago for the main actuator. Reach down, simply wiggle it back and forth gently and pull it out. And then just let it hang there for now. Once you've unplugged the main power plug, you're going to want to plug the machine back into a power source. Once you've plugged the machine back into the power source, we're going to extend the new actuator about the length that the one in the current machine is extended. To do so, you're going to take the two power wires from the actuator and touch them to the power source. You're going to touch yellow to the negative and red to the positive. Just tap it back and forth till you've extended it about the length of the current actuator. Once you've extended it to the length you want, unplug the machine from the power source. Once you've unplugged the power source, the next step is to unplug the Wagos from the circuit board. We're looking for, again, the three Wagos towards you to the left of the circuit board. Simply move them gently back and forth and unplug them from the pin. Repeat that for the next two. Once you have the Wago pins unconnected, you're going to want to unscrew the reed switches from the main actuator and take them off. Grab the bundle cord and simply gently pull them so that you give yourself a little play in the cord. Next, unscrew the screws with your finger till they're loose and slide the switches off the end of the actuator. Drape them over and just kind of let them hang there for now. After you've removed the reed switches from the main actuator, next you're going to want to remove the left side skin. The first step is to remove the machine key and set it aside. Next, there are three T25 screws, two in the front, one at the top, one at the bottom, and one at the top. You're going to want to remove those first. Lastly, you're going to want to remove the rubber bumper, which has an 8mm socket cap screw in it. Use the 8mm deep socket head to remove it. There may or may not be some side shelf screws in the skin, right there and there on both the back and front. Those would be Phillips head screws. If they are there, you'll need to remove those as well. Once you have all the screws out, simply take the side skin off the machine and set it aside, and we'll put it back on later. Once you've taken the reed switches off the main actuator, if you have a jack, this is the best time to use it. Simply place it under the trash tub head and jack it up until it's firmly underneath the head. The next step is to take the bolt out that connects the actuator to the scissor link. To do so, you will use the 3/4 socket head and the 3/4 wrench. The bolt head is on this side with the nut over on this side. So you're going to want to take that out first. Once you've gotten to the point where you can unscrew the nut with your hand, do so. Hold on to that. Next, we're going to have to pull the bolt out of its holding. To do so, if you have the jack in place, simply raise it a little bit to take pressure off the bolt. If not, you can use your knee for leverage under the compactor head to pull it out. To get the bolt out, the first best step to do is to take the wrench and smack the bolt with the wrench to get it to move in that way a little bit, because this will make it easier to pull out. Once you have the bolt smacked as far as you can go on this side, you're going to leverage the compactor head up to take pressure off the bolt and pull it out. You can do this with either your knee or your hand. You kind of want to twist it back and forth, and eventually it should slide out. Once you have the bolt pulled most of the way through, pull it all the way out. Once you have the bolt out, simply lift the machine up a little bit and pull the scissor link down so that the head of the actuator falls down and free. Once you've removed that bottom bolt, the next step is to remove the bolt up here in the pivot block. Once you're at the point where you can screw off the nut by hand, do so. And set the nut aside. Once you have the nut off, you're going to want to pull the bolt out, but make sure you're holding the main actuator when you do so it doesn't fall. Best spot to hold it is down here at the motor. Lift it up a little bit and pull the bolt out. Once you have removed the bolt, simply tilt the back end of the actuator down and slide it out. Then carefully set it around and just set it down on the frame of the machine here. Pivot block for the actuator is loose, so make sure it doesn't fall out on you while you're working. Pull it out and set it aside. Once you've taken the main actuator out and have set it on top of the frame there, you're going to remove the power cords of it from the waggle connector. To do so, simply hold the waggle connector with the wires towards the bottom, insert the fine tip or jeweler screwdriver at a slight angle upward, get some pressure on it and push down and pull out the wire. Repeat for the yellow wire. Once you have the wires out of the waggle connector, next look inside to make sure that the power wires aren't zip tied together or capped together. In this case, they're both, so first we have to remove the caps and cut the zip ties. Once you have cut the zip tie and removed the caps, pull the wires through the opening. It's easiest to do them one at a time. Once you've pulled the wires through, take the old actuator and set it aside. Once you have the old actuator out of there, the next stop is to replace the pivot block in. You'll notice that this bracket here has fallen, so make sure you line up the holes with the holes of the mount in here and slide the bolt through to hold the place. Next, take the pivot block, slide it back into the frame, and fit the bolt in to the opening of the pivot block enough so that you're not obstructing the hole of the pivot block. Take the new actuator, fit the black stubby end into the opening on the pivot block, and push the bolt through as far as you can. Next, take the other side of the bracket and hold it up and push the bolt all the way through. Screw the nut back on by hand. And then tighten with the socket head and wrench. We want the bolt and nut snug, but not so tight that it's squishing the frame and pivot block. On the new actuator, if not already, feel at the end of the little guide rails here, and if there's a little ridge of paint, you're going to want to cut that off with a box cutter to easily slide the reed switches back in place. Once you have this bolt in, you're going to want to take the wires from the motor and put them through the hole to get them toward the electronics tray and pull them through. You don't want too much hanging, but you don't want it to be super pulled tight. Leave a little bit of slack. The next step is to replace this bottom bolt. First step you want to do is take the bolt and slide it, pull the scissor link up and slide it back into the groove so that it's just about to peek through the opening here. With either the jack or your hand or knee, pull the scissor link up and start trying to fit the bolt through the opening in the motor head. If you can't quite get it flush with the metal, take the wrench and give it a few whacks until you get it nice and tight up there. Once you have the bolt back in, screw the nut back on by hand and retighten it with the wrench and the socket. Okay. Like we did with the top bolt, we want to screw the nut on far enough so that it's nice and snug, but not so tight that it's squishing the whole bolt in its holding here. You're going to take the power wires that you threaded through the hole and you're going to want to cut them to the appropriate length. The appropriate length is that they're long enough to reach back far enough to touch the power source if they're unplugged from the Wago. About right there in this case. Cut them and strip them at the ends. Once you have the wires cut to the right length, we're going to put them back in the Wago connector. To do so, hold the Wago connector so the holes where you're going to put the wires are facing down and insert your screwdriver. In the hole to the right, we're going to put the red wire, so push down with the screwdriver and insert the power wire. Give it a little tug, and if it comes out, it's not in far enough. It should go in pretty smoothly if you have it in far enough. Give it a little tug, doesn't come out, so we're good. Repeat with the yellow wire. Give it a little tug, all good. Once you've gotten tightened, plug them back into the spot on the board labeled comp motor. It's the white plug right there. When you have it plugged in, the red wire should be towards the front of the machine and the yellow should be towards the rear. Then kind of take the excess wire and just kind of lay it down in the middle of the board there. Now we're going to put the reed switches back on the main actuator. You're going to put them on in the following order. You're going to slide the silver screw one on first. Then you're going to do the red. And then the blue screw finally. And just leave them on there loosely for now. Next, you're going to want to take the tape measure and place it alongside the reed switches on the rail. You're going to want to screw the blue reed switch down pretty much right at the bottom at the 0-inch mark. And just hand tighten it until it's snug. Then we're going to want to put the red switch at about 2 1/4 inches up. And again, hand tighten it down. It may slide back and forth a little bit while you're tightening it, but as long as you tighten it at about the right spot, you should be fine. The final measurement on the reed switch with the silver screw is going to be 5 1/16 inches from the bottom. That's for the front edge of the reed switch. Next, we're going to plug the sensors back in to the circuit board. So pull them a little snug again up here, find the right one and plug them back into the correct pin. This will be extremely easy if you had already labeled them. They should go from right to left, extend, home, full. Next, we're going to want to test to make sure that the compactor actuator works and that the head comes up to the right height. So first, you're going to want to close the door, take the interlock key and close the interlock switch. For instructions on how to do that, see the appropriate video, and then supply power back to the machine. Supply power back to the machine, the head cover should come up toward the normal starting height. We want to measure how high the compactor head comes up. To do so, take a tape measure and touch it to this bottom metal piece of the compactor head here, and then measure at the top of the back bracket here. We want it to be at about 6.5 to 6 5/8 inches on the tape measure. If it's too low, you're going to have to increase the height of the silver head's reed switch. In this case, my compactor head didn't come up far enough, so I'm going to take the reed switch with the silver screw, unscrew it, and move it up just a hair. As soon as you move it, the compactor head will move, so screw it down before it comes back up. Okay. We repeat the measuring process and see that we are still about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch too low. So again, we're going to move the silver reed switch. Because we're so close, we're going to move it just a hair. We measure again and we can see that we are right between 6.5 and 6 5/8 inches, so we're at the right height. Now we're done adjusting the reed sensor switches. Once we've tested and make sure that the actuator works and that the head cover is coming up to the right height, we're going to put the machine back together. First step we want to do is open the door with the machine key by turning it to the 3 and 9 position and putting the left side skin back on. Put the side skin back on, take the machine key, turn it to the lock position and pull it out. Then you're going to want to fit the side skin over the back panel and wrap it around and push it so that the keyhole matches up with the key. Slide it into place, put your foot on the bottom of the skin to kind of hold it in place, and then you're going to want to screw in the top screw on the front side. And the back screw at the top. Now it should be held in place and you can take your foot away to do the bottom 2 screws. First we're going to do the last T25 screw at the front and bottom. Lastly, we're going to replace the 8mm socket screw in the rubber bumper on the bottom back of the machine. When you screw it in, make sure it's snug but not too tight that it's squishing the rubber bumper. Next step is to replace the top. For instructions on how to do that, see the appropriate video. At this point, you should have the door open but the key switch in the lock position. Insert the machine key, turn it to the open position, shut the main door, unlock it, and take the machine key out. At this point, perform the 3 door openings and compaction cycle test. For procedures on how to do that, see the appropriate video. Once you've done the test and determined that the machine is ready to be put back in service, simply take the machine key, open the door, open the main door, put the trash tub back in the machine, close the door and lock it. You should see green ready on the display, and at this point you're ready to put the machine back in service.